Surviving in ancient Greece was more of a sinister challenge than a stroll through its beautiful architecture. Most people look at this period through romantic eyes. They think about amazing arts, philosophy, and a land of vibrant mythology. But the truth is you wouldn't last 24 hours in this seemingly divine era. Ancient Greece was brutal and quite unfair, with their draconian laws, their nightmarish social structures, and even more. Let's find out why, in ancient Greece, surviving a single day was an Olympian feat in itself. The dark shadows of oligarchy and horrific social structures. Picture this: Athens, once a beacon of democracy, taking a nosedive to the pit of oligarchy after its defeat in the Peloponnesian War in 404 BC. As part of this system, a small group of people now had control of the country. The proud democratic tradition was shattered, and a reign of tyranny began. The term tyrant, once merely the name of a form of government, turned into what we know now, something far more sinister: oppressive rulers seizing power unconstitutionally. The democratic tradition got tossed out the window, and in strolled the 30 tyrants. These weren't your everyday rulers. They were more like the cast of a horror movie. The word tyrant went from a mild political term to something that'd give you the heebie-jeebies. The 30 tyrants, handpicked by Sparta to give Athens a new constitution, didn't exactly throw a democracy-themed party. Nope, they plunged the city into chaos with draconian laws. And no, it has nothing to do with dragons. These laws were ruthless, with kangaroo court hearings sending Athenian citizens on a one-way trip to imprisonment, capital punishment, and disenfranchisement. And the very ideas that Athens had prided itself on during its golden age were crushed under the weight of oligarchic oppression. The city then found itself at a crossroads, and what followed was a violent clash between oligarchs and democrats, with leaders disappearing, exiles multiplying, and false charges becoming the norm. Prominent voices of democracy, like Cleophon, faced arrests and condemnations. The violence unleashed by the 30 tyrants was staggering. Oligarchs targeted residents, tax collectors, and anyone associated with democracy. Nearly 1,500 Athenians faced capital punishment, meaning public death penalty, while many more were exiled or forced to flee the city. Moreover, these set the stage for debt enslavement, where wealthy landowners could enslave their tenants for however long they wanted to, if they didn't pay their debts. For another, only those who carried weapons or owned a certain amount of land had any political rights. Also, many of the punishments didn't seem to fit the crimes. You could face the death penalty for stealing a cabbage. My cabbages! But if you accidentally killed someone, which is pretty small for an accident in my opinion, and then apologized to the person's family, you'd be off the hook. Draco's laws were eventually deemed too draconian. So in 594 BC, just a few decades after they were enacted, they were repealed by the lawmaker Solon and replaced with a more lenient set of laws. And guess what? Socrates, the big shot in the philosophy world, got caught in the crossfire too. Sticking around Athens due to his connection with Critias, Socrates paid the ultimate price for his democratic ideals, facing harsh political inspections on his work, which ultimately led to his demise. And the 30 tyrants, initially seen as Athens' political saviors, became the villains in this twisted tale. Violence, oppression, and a complete disregard for democracy. It was like the city had switched genres overnight. It was an era where survival meant navigating the horrific political allegiances as enemies faced severe persecution. Something you clearly couldn't have done today. A city of slaves. If you think you'd escape your 9-to-5 grind by time traveling to ancient Greece, think again. Slavery was the hot trend, and Athens was a bustling hub with 60,000 to 80,000 slaves. That's more than half the population. Each household had, on average, 3 slaves. Sparta, not to be outdone, but the ratio for Spartan to slave was 1 to 20. Had helots, state-owned servants, who worked the fields and handed over most of their harvest to the government. Having an army of slaves meant the men could focus on becoming warriors, and Sparta's military machine flexed its muscles. But let's not romanticize it. The Helots had it extremely rough. Beatings were a regular occurrence to keep their spirits broken. One account, written by Myron of Preen, stated that the Helots were subject to a stipulated number of beatings every year, regardless of any wrongdoing, so that they never forgot they were slaves. In Athens, too, beatings were common for slaves. One prominent Athenian statesman wrote that the body of a slave is made responsible for all his misdeeds, whereas corporal punishment is the last penalty to inflict on a free man. Born into slavery, captured in war, or drowned in debt, one of the many ways to slavery. A culture of war. Despite their democracy and philosophy, guess what? The Greeks really liked going to war. And by really, I mean really. And around 500 BC, they finally had the realization that, hey, why not hire some foreign mercenaries to do the fighting for us? But before that, let's rewind a bit. Fighting was done mostly by your average citizens. In archaic Greek times, between 800 and 500 BC, you'd find your average citizen, the farmer, or the common worker, being forced into battle. Picture this: militias formed on a part-time basis, fighting during the summer, and then if you survived, going back to your day jobs or farms for the harvest. Yeah, fighting was that casual back then. And oh, did I mention you'd have to cough up the cash for your own gear? If you were broke, you were the pawn that they'd toss into battle with a good luck pat on the back, because most of the citizens were extremely poor. Now, if you were slightly richer, you could be a hoplite, an infantryman with spears, shields, and body armor, which was either inherited from family or purchased. But hey, fighting half naked in the blistering Greek sun was also an option. The deadly plague and bloody medicinal practices. Picture this: Athens 430 BC. Another reason as to why there's a 1 in 3 chance you won't make it out alive even after 24 hours. The Spartan siege brings more than just warriors. It brings a mysterious outbreak that wipes out over a third of the population. What was the culprit, you ask? Nobody knows for sure. Maybe typhus, influenza, measles, or the dreaded Ebola. According to historian Thucydides, the plague might have hitched a ride from Africa, spreading through Persia, and finally landing in Athens. Symptoms? Fever, inflamed eyes, bleeding from the mouth, and respiratory failure. The results? Chaos. Nearly 100,000 people perish, and Athens, once gleaming in its golden age, is left in tatters. Spoiler alert, Athens gets absorbed by the Sparta Empire about 25 years later. If we're on this topic of a zero survival policy, let's just talk about the world of medicine. Brace yourselves, it's like stepping into an episode of a medical drama. Back in the day, saying, "I'm not feeling well," wasn't just a casual complaint. It was a spiritual issue. Before the 5th century BC, the Greeks were convinced that illnesses were the divine punishment of the gods. Feeling under the weather? Blame Zeus. Getting better? Hermes must have delivered a divine get-well card, and the gods were the ultimate healthcare providers. Now, fast forward to 500 BC, where things got a bit more sophisticated. But, and it's a big but, the line between science and religion was still extremely shady. Enter the god Asclepius, the OG multitasker, divine healer, and a top-tier doctor. Imagine having Zeus on speed dial for your cold. However, here's the kicker: no official doctor's license required. Anyone with a knack for the mysterious art of medicine, or techne, could proclaim themselves a healer. So, what's the prescription? Drumroll, please? Bloodletting. Yep, you heard it right. The act of withdrawing blood from a person's veins. Bloodletting was all the rage, and it was connected to a process called humorism. Sounds like a stand-up routine, but it was dead serious. Humorism divided the human body into 4 humors: blood, yellow bile, black bile, and phlegm. Think of it as an ancient version of checking your body's oil levels. They believed that in a healthy person, these humors were perfectly balanced. But the second you'd even minorly fall ill, you had a free ticket to Painville, because illness meant that the humors were out of balance. Also, temperature was directly connected to the humors. For example, hot foods producing yellow bile, cold foods conjuring phlegm. Now, here's the plot twist. Humorism wasn't a one-season wonder. It stuck around until the revolutionary germ theory in the 1850s to finally show it the exit door. Up until then, imagine someone taking your blood sample for straight up hours to fix a minor cold. So while ancient Greece rocked the arts, philosophy, and architecture, healthcare wasn't exactly their shining achievement. Fickle gods and superstitions. The Greeks believed in gods for every nook and cranny of life. And these deities weren't exactly cuddly, nor were they just watching over you. They were scrutinizing and observing your every move, like celestial chess players. Anger a god, and you're in for a world of trouble. You'd be constantly pleasing them with sacrifices, prayers, and rituals. The Oracle of Delphi might guide you, or maybe not. The gods worked in mysterious ways. Plus, superstitions were rampant. Spilling oil, crossing paths with a black cat, or sneezing all could be ominous signs leading to death. Living in constant perpetual fear of divine wrath? No thank you. So even considering your survival for a single day is something I don't think you can do. Now, let's be real. Who wants to live in perpetual fear of divine wrath? It's like being under a cosmic microscope, with the gods playing an intergalactic game of gotcha. So, while the Greeks had gods for every occasion, navigating life in their divine realm was like attempting an Olympian-level obstacle course where the finish line was uncertain. Picture this: gods for every nook and cranny of life. Need help with love? Aphrodite's got your back. Want a favor in war? Ares might lend a hand. But here's the catch: these gods weren't the fluffy, benevolent types. Oh no, angering a god was like inviting cosmic chaos into your life. Ever forgotten to say please to Zeus? Brace yourself for a lifetime of stress and panic about a celestial disaster coming any second. Over-enthusiastic festivities were another extent to which everyone went to please their gods. For example, during the festivals dedicated to Dionysus, the god of wine and revelry, the celebrants always become a little too enthusiastic and drunk in their festivities. What starts as a joyful occasion turns into a chaotic and rowdy event, leaving the priests struggling to restore order in the name of the god of excess. Sacrifices, prayers, and rituals, consider them your divine insurance policy. You constantly had to sacrifice animals or burn your prized possessions on the temple altars as offerings to keep the peace and please them. Every time a seasonal harvest took place, you had to offer half of your produce on the altar of Demeter for good luck. Food and wine offerings were a whole other budget planning act, considering how much and how often you'd have to give as offerings to the gods, even if it messed up all your finances. Pouring liquids, usually wine, onto the ground or an altar was a common ritual. This act, known as libation, was a symbolic offering to the gods. Libations were often made during ceremonies, before meals, or as a gesture of respect and gratitude. Also, if you didn't, well, we've already told you what everyone thought would happen. Now imagine seeking guidance from the Oracle of Delphi, the ancient Google of prophecy. Greeks sought guidance from oracles, which were individuals believed to have a direct connection with the gods. The most famous oracle was the Oracle of Delphi, where people would consult the priestess Pythia to receive divine insights and predictions. Will Zeus be cool if I date his daughter? Should I plant my crops today? The oracle might have the answers, or she might just drop a cryptic riddle and call it a day. The gods worked in mysterious and often frustratingly unpredictable ways, and one would just have to religiously abide by the instructions. And these could also go extremely wrong. For example, a person seeking guidance from the Oracle of Delphi receives a cryptic message that is open to multiple interpretations. They misinterpret the oracle's words, and instead of avoiding danger, inadvertently walk straight into a troublesome situation, believing they are fulfilling the divine will. You could see people do the most absurd things, such as jumping off of cliffs, because that's what they thought the oracle meant. So there you have it, a whirlwind tour of why you wouldn't last 24 hours in ancient Greece. Not as Instagram-worthy as you thought, huh? From political turmoil and draconian laws to plague-ridden streets and ever-watchful gods, survival was no Olympian feat. It was a Herculean challenge. But before we sign off, hit that subscribe button and don't forget to tell us in the comments what you'd like to see next, because History Duck is just getting started on our time-traveling adventures. Who knows where we'll unravel the pages of history next?